Welcome to Using Your Power. I'm David Andrew Wiebe, and joining me is...
Maveen, Kaura.
Well, it's great to be chatting with you today, Maveen. How's it going?
Hey, David, I'm doing very well. How's your day?
Not bad. I feel a little bit tired today, but you know what? We've been doing a bit of a recording today, and that's kind of energizing in a way. You know, today we wanted to talk a little bit about personal development, because really that's one of the main topics we're going to be covering at Using Your Power. And we know how important podcast number 1 is, right? Everybody goes back and listens to number 1. And maybe if you find us later on when we have episode 100 or episode 200, if you like it, we know you're going to come back to 1 to listen to it, which is why we're going to try to make this great. But Maveen and I, this is the first time we've been podcasting together. So we're really still figuring out our chemistry at this point. We're still going to make it great, or as good as we possibly can. But I think the main point is just to have a lot of fun and maybe establish what it is that we're going to cover on Using Your Power, right?
You got it, David. I know if people want to go back to episode 1, they'll definitely going to see us grow. You're going to see us change. You're going to also see why we're in personal development and what we're doing in personal development, and how, you know, what we experience can also be experienced by our listeners, and they can use that information to keep growing themselves. I know that when episode 100 does come, I'm going to go listen to episode 1 again and really see what we sound like. You're right. I mean, we've known each other now for a couple of years now, but we've never really done this type of podcast or this type of show where we actually go kind of back and forth. We've had conversations, many of them, but never really sat down and said, let's just record what we talk about and see where it takes us.
And that's somewhat what it's based off of, because we used to have all these conversations, and we still do, really. We go to Starbucks or some other coffee house, we get together, we talk about life, we process our problems, and then we get to business eventually at some point.
Well, as soon as we get past our tangents and our conversations, and I know me, I go off on tangents all the time, and I got to tell you another story, or I got to give you an example, and I get pretty excited and pretty excitable that way. So, you know, if I go off on tangents here, just kind of tap me on the shoulder or something and tell me to get back in line.
Oh, I want to hear your tangents. I don't know.
Well, they'll be good conversations.
I feel like one of the reasons, like, the music entrepreneur is where it's at is because I've had your help and I've had somebody to bounce my ideas off of. It's really important. Like, I do believe in this whole idea of owning the race course, or really owning and controlling your business, but that also means at times that you don't always have the feedback you need to move it to the next level. So that's one of the things I've really enjoyed about connecting with you on an ongoing basis.
Thanks, David. I appreciate that. I mean, those are some really kind words. I've enjoyed sitting with you and really just watched you grow. I haven't really done any of the changes for you. You've really had to have experienced those changes. Yeah. You know, and just taking a look at the website when you first started off and saying, you know what, this is what I think, this is what I would maybe do or, try. I mean, I've never developed a website. I never had done any of the things that you had to do. And so, really seeing and you trusting me on saying, you know what, maybe this guy has a point. I'll make that little change here, or I'll try this. And really trusting the fact that I'm not giving you information that was incorrect. It was to help you, develop yourself, develop your business as well, right?
Yeah, having that outsider perspective is very beneficial.
Absolutely.
And important to today's topic as well. Here's a segue. We're going to be talking about personal development. Why does it matter? Why should you care? Why would people want to get into personal development? And I kind of want to start with this story, which is I was recently chatting with a friend, and he was saying, you know me, anything personal development, I just don't believe in it. The interesting part about him is I do think he actually does assimilate or subscribe to certain ideas of personal development. He actually reads pretty heavily even into philosophy, and he has very strong opinionated beliefs about the world. So I don't think the concept is entirely lost on him. But I think what he's describing is, in the workplace, some manager reads a book, on a whim because they don't read books. And then they decide, hey, this is an awesome book. Let's get all the employees doing this stuff and let's implement it right away. And then, they look for approval from their boss. And because they're so excited, they just sell it to their boss. Next thing you know, everybody on the team is now having to study and learn from this book, even though who knows, it could have just been the first book that manager stumbled upon. It may not be anything special, just that like he'd never read it before. So it was exciting and interesting to him. So yeah, I think there's sort of that whole thing of like personal development applied to the workplace, and now, oh, but you didn't communicate the right way. Remember what it said in that book? You're supposed to communicate this way. I feel like it's that sort of maybe rigidity sometimes that people associate with personal development.
Yeah, you think you're right. And, I can give you tons of examples from the workaday world. That's exactly where I'm coming from. I've worked in the banks. I've worked in insurance, David, as you know.
Yeah.
I've sold homes. I've sold cars. I've sold technology, and it's been interesting to know and see the way that the managers perceive, and they come to you. You're right. Their own managers are just saying, hey, you need to grow your team. You need to motivate it. And a lot of times these guys are all just positional leaders that are being, told to motivate their team. Sometimes they don't even have the right skills to motivate their sales teams, since that's the world I'm coming from. They're just kind of out there trying to give you that, hooray speech that really doesn't necessarily motivate everybody. There is definitely a technique to do so. I think you know that. Me and you've had the opportunity to throw those techniques off each other, and I'm sure we've had the conversation where whatever I say is not meant to hurt you in any way. It really is to help you. But if it comes off a little harsh, understand where it's coming from, right?
When you're masterminding, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to give your ideas and help the person understand where it's really coming from, right?
Well, you raise an important question there, which is what's the difference between positional leadership and other leadership?
Good point. David, a positional leader to me is someone who has just been put in that position, not necessarily having the right leadership skills as you would expect, let's say your CEOs or your upper management to have, right? A positional leader to me is just someone who's been given the opportunity to maybe take over a new team or maybe start a division, but really has no real experience in maybe sales. Maybe they come from a different part of the company, but never really came in there. Now are looking to motivate 10, 20, maybe 40, even 100 people to, hit quotas that their managers are asking them to attain, right? Being in that position can be tough, and it's not for everybody, as we know. What is a position? It's something that is supposed to help the people on the team be inspired by, and that's what positional leadership can be.
So are you saying that people that are in positional leadership may be formally qualified but aren't necessarily qualified in other ways to be a positional leader?
I think so, David. A lot of people, like I said, are just given the opportunity to, try to prove themselves when they've proved themselves in other facets of life, but have never really, for example, proved themselves in sales. They've just been kind of thrown in that position just to say, hey, let's see what you can do, right? So I think the people who will succeed in that positional leadership really do take personal development seriously and understand that, knowing and having knowledge and worked in a certain part of the market or segment will also give them the experience to continue to grow.
That's interesting stuff. But yeah, I think that's oftentimes how personal development comes across to people. And some people do get something out of it. They'll go to like a leadership conference because the whole company will go and learn from some other leaders or leadership speakers. And then they'll come back and some of the employees will be inspired by that. So sometimes it's also a good thing and not always a negative thing. But I think at this point, we should talk a little bit about what personal development means to us, because if people only have that association of in the corporate environment, let's bring a book or a resource to the table and now everybody has to subscribe to it, versus self-directed, self-education, I feel like is a completely different thing. So
that you're right.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
So how would you go about defining personal development, Maveen? What does it mean to you?
David, that's a great question. And as I've grown and I've changed, It started to mean different things as I've reached different parts of my life right now. When I was in my early 20s, started getting out of college, starting off my career, personal development meant to me was really moving forward, trying to grow in the companies I was working at, really just focused on work, not really anything else. As I've gone through, work, and I've tried different things now, I'm in my late 30s now, 38 to be exact, and I've found different ways to grow and different places to grow now, right? Personal development now only doesn't work for work. It's now also for different parts of my life. I'm also married. I'm also looking to be an entrepreneur and start off and do other things. I'm looking to get into wholesaling and just different ideas and different ways to continue, right? So to me, personal development really means is to stay ahead of what's out there in the market, try to learn and try to continue to apply what I'm learning.
I was going to ask about that because I wanted to move away a little bit from that corporate conversation. But you're right. If you're in a job and you want to be better, or if you want to be promoted, or if you want to be a standout employee, then personal development can help you. Now, if you're not indispensable to the company, you also put yourself at risk of being fired when you stand out from the crowd.
Absolutely.
But then you also increase your potential to be somebody that's indispensable, or what Seth Godin calls a linchpin to the whole operation. And then no matter what you do, they're not going to be able to fire you because they see you as being essential to the company. I guess I should talk a little bit about what I think personal development is, or what my feelings around it is as well. One of the reasons I think I felt the need to get into it was because my dad passed away when I was 13, about 13 years old. So it's been many years now. I guess it's about 20 years since he passed away. And I still was searching and looking for my identity and trying to figure out my place in the world. And I grew up in Japan, but as I came back to Canada, I just didn't really feel like I made quite as many friends and didn't feel like I belong. I've since sort of figured out, or I've reconciled, that people here are very individualistic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in different cultures, you're going to find people being different too, right, David? So obviously moving from
That's right.
the Japanese culture, which you're a lot more familiar with than myself, coming to North America, particularly in Alberta, everybody's a little bit more conservative.
Yeah. No, that's a big part of it, is just the difference in thinking, the culture. Japan might be a little bit more community minded in terms of how their culture works overall, whereas we can be individuals. But I think, we're sometimes individualistic to the point where it's detrimental to ourselves, actually.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, but personal development was something that I was tried reading different things. I think I'd often heard that reading was a good thing, like readers are leaders or whatever.
Yeah, that's one of those quoted sayings. I don't
Often
remember who said
quoted.
it, but that's one thing I've heard myself.
Yeah, totally. So I would first just tried to find things that I could actually read. I used to try like J.R. Tolkien and Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, and it just didn't capture me. Like, I'd still make it through to the end of the book, but it would take me months, if not years, to do it.
Yeah, I've had books like that I've read that just take you months on end to read, and you put it down after one page, and it's so dry you can't get through it, or it's so exciting, but it really didn't add any additional value to what you're reading when you were done.
Yeah, exactly. And then as I got into the music industry and I learned about CD Baby and distributing music and such, that's when I first heard about Derek Sivers, because at the time he was still the founder, CEO of the company. He's still I guess you're once a founder, you're always a founder, but he's now the former founder of CD Baby. He doesn't work for them anymore. And through him, I learned about Steve Pavlina. And I think one of the first things I ever read or looked at was not accepting other people's timelines for your life, and kind of gave the example of going through, getting a college degree in I think 2 years instead of the regular 4 or whatever. And I thought that was pretty amazing. So that was something that I found that I could read, and I enjoyed reading.
I think it's the other way around, getting a college degree in 2 years versus the 4.
It would take 4 years, which they did in 2 years.
That's correct.
If I said it the other way, I'm sorry.
And that's personal development when you do it faster.
Yeah, definitely. But I think, yeah, that sort of goes in line with challenging the status quo or challenging the traditional way of thinking and going about things in life. That's sort of what personal development has meant to me as well. So I enjoyed books on comedy and I enjoyed books on personal development. So that's what I kept on reading. Other books that didn't always interest me quite as much. And Mav, you and I share that experience of having been a part of various network marketing organizations where personal development is actually pretty significant component to the whole thing. Although I think that they also instill some beliefs and some thoughts that may not always be productive or wholesome or what you need to hear at the time.
Absolutely. You know, David, we both joined the same network marketing group at 2 different times.
Yes.
You know, mine, I joined in my earlier to mid 20s, you know, almost about 10 to 13 years ago now. You joined, I think, about what, 5 years ago, if I remember correctly?
That's about right, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we definitely experienced similar things, almost on parallel things, just on different timelines, it feels like. You know, and one of the things, you're right, we're stressed and always were stressed about reading and listening to CDs and you know, and growing your personal self and then applying those things as well, right, to that business that we were in.
Yeah.
And you know, that has its place, absolutely. And I mean, for my own personal development, that was one of the things that made me want to learn and grow myself. So, you know, I'm not going to take anything away from that portion of the direct marketing.
Yes.
But I will say that, you know, the other parts of it, but, you know, I'm not going to speak to her at this point in time. But, you know, just on the personal development side, it did make a huge difference, right? I never used to read books. You know, I never even wanted to. You know, I got out of school and I was excited and you know, I said, everything I need to know I already learned. You know, I came from that mindset. And if I just work and grow and just, you know, do what they tell me, I'll be successful. And then I you know, just like you, joined the direct marketing, and from there I learned, you know, you do need to read, and I started reading, and not just one book. You know, I started reading multiple books at a time, and finishing multiple books, and you know, 10 books a year, which was huge for me at that time.
It's very much a people business, right? So it probably opened you up to at least opened you up to the idea of talking to more people and making more connections and building relationships and things like that. And those were some of the values that were instilled in us, I guess, without maybe getting into the really negative side of what can be network marketing at times.
We can get into that later. But right now, we're not going to get into that.
We're going to stick to our personal development topic.
That's right.
So we've talked a little bit about how we feel about personal development. I think now we're ready to get into, why does personal development matter?
That's a great question. I mean, going back into history, I think they've always taught personal development in one way or another. You know, again, depending on if our listeners here are into religion or not into religion, doesn't really matter, you know, but they've always had books. Even 2,000 years ago, they had some sort of scriptures or whatnot, and they were considered the books of the time, right? Although a lot of this information was memorized and passed on through memory or on some sort of tablet or whatnot, but they've always talked about having ethics and morals and being a good person, right? And I think that's what personal development really comes down to in myself, where I am right now. It's about ethics and doing the right thing and just being the best person I can be for where I am right now and for where I want to go in the future.
What if you like instinctually know the kind of person that you are and want to be? Is there still value in trying to think about personal development or applying personal development to your life?
Absolutely. I mean, with an ever-changing world, David, you can see that, you know, what you know today will change again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. So if you continue to believe who you are today, you won't actually allow yourself to grow. Right. And if you let yourself grow and move with the times, you know, as you can see, we had an iPhone 1 and now we're coming on to iPhone 7 as of this recording. Right. Look at all the little things that changed in that phone. Are you still using your iPhone 1?
If I had one.
If you had one, would you still be using
No,
it?
I probably wouldn't. I probably would upgrade.
Right? You'd probably upgrade and change with the times, right?
Yeah.
So if you were closed-minded, you probably would just bought that one phone. You'd probably still be on a rotary if you even know what that is, David.
Yes, I do.
So you'd have that phone. You might have a plug into your wall. You got to use a quarter. You would never grow. But if you take what's coming at you on a daily basis and change and grow along with it because you're learning about yourself, and that change within self, I think, allows you to become that person that you think you are, but even better than that person that you think you are.
Yeah, personal development, I feel like it's like holding up a mirror to yourself. And what do you see in that reflection? Because you could, in your mind, you could conceive an idea of who you are. Like, just to give an example, maybe you think you're totally fit and you got a six pack and you got big pipes. And then you look in the mirror and you go, hold on a second, when I take an honest look at myself, I don't have all that yet. I'm still working on it.
No, you're still scrawny. You have that gut sticking out, and you're actually got a hairy chest when you thought it was all nice and shaved, looking all nice.
So part of it is we're deceived. We don't always see ourselves. I think to an extent we all think we're special, and maybe we are in different ways, but I think when all things being equal, we all have the opportunity to be better and to be more than we are, right?
Absolutely, David. What do you think self-image and personal development have to do with each other?
Well, I think that's why one of the reasons why I got into self-development is because of having a very weak self-image. I still wouldn't say that I've reached the perfection of humanity, but I think I've gained a lot of confidence through the things that I've done. And I'm still a sensitive person to this day, but I feel like I get over that. Like, if something bugs me, it doesn't take me weeks to get over it now. It's like, give it a day or two to process it, and I'm good to go again. But I am the kind of person that when something first hits the pond, if you were to think of me as the pond, and there's a ripple out effect, even if it's just a pebble, I that's kind of how I experience things. That's
Right.
kind of how I feel things. So I need to be able to process it. And being a sensitive person, like earlier in my life, it would have taken me a long time to maybe process just a little ripple in the pond, whereas now a huge rock could be thrown into the mix and it'll take me less time to process it. So that's just one metaphor for the way in which I've changed and improved, I think, my self-image through the process of studying and learning personal development. Do you have any thoughts to add to that?
Absolutely, David. I think you hit something on the nose here. Letting go. I think that's huge. When you experience something, it's not part of your self-image. You have to let go, right? And that actually helps grow your self-image, right? I'm going to give you a story. It is a Buddhist story, a little different, but hopefully our listeners here can appreciate the story.
Well, I'd love to hear it.
There's two monks walking in a forest, and they've talked about being celibate and not touching a woman, and just really focusing on being that Buddhist, right? And then getting that enlightenment. And they're walking in a forest one day, and they come across a river, and at the river there's a lady standing there. And the lady's crying because she can't cross this river. So the one monk goes ahead and crosses the river. The second monk picks up the lady and says, let's cross the river. So he crosses the river with her and drops her off on the other side. She's very grateful and thankful to him. And they two monks continue on the way, and the lady continues on her way. About an hour and a half later, the one monk turns to the other monk and says, you know what? I'm not happy with what you just did. You picked up and broke your you picked up this lady, you broke your celibacy, you touched a lady, you broke the rules, man. And I don't know exactly how that conversation went, but he wasn't happy with him. And he said, I've put this lady down hours ago, but you're still carrying her with you. I think there's such a lesson to be learned in that. Now, apologize for not being able to tell the story exactly how it goes, but I think it really does give the gist of what I'm trying to say with letting go of things and growing your own self-image.
Like the idea of carrying baggage or luggage with you long after
Absolutely.
something has occurred or happened in your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And like I talked about the fact that my dad passed away earlier in my life, like that's a piece of luggage that I could continue to carry with me. I think to some extent, you never forget the people that pass away that are important to you. but you don't have to continue to carry the burden and the hurt and the loneliness and the isolation that you
That's
feel
right.
continually for the rest of your life.
Right.
That's unnecessary.
Carry the memories, right? You
Yeah.
know, you help your dad live through the memories, and that's huge, right? And you're right. That baggage, I mean, can stay with you forever if you allow it,
It
to,
definitely
right?
can.
You know, what steps did you take, David, to kind of, you know, not saying that you've gotten over that death, because I don't think you ever can, but,
Yeah.
you know, what steps have you taken to kind of minimize the baggage?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question. I do feel like the books that I delved into have had a part in helping me overcome that. I think for one thing, I recognized that there was this deep, dark valley that had to be, the only way to get through something is to go through it. And the longer you stay there, the harder it is to get out, because you become rather familiar with your own difficulties or self-pity and so on. So first of all, it's just recognizing that there is this deep, dark valley that I had to go through. And then it was a willingness to go through it day by day.
Let me stop you. How did you see that valley, David? Because I mean, when you're in it, sometimes you don't necessarily see around it. So how did you really see where you were to start making that change?
It's a question of interpretation. I think one of the reasons I was able to recognize it is just by observing how my family's members were dealing with it, or really not dealing with it in a lot
Right.
of ways. And that caused me to realize that staying in that place was unhealthy. But the whole thing about interpretation is, and this is something that's going to be in my upcoming book as well, we have to be careful with how we interpret life events, because if we interpret them the wrong way, or in a way that isn't totally healthy, that's how we create more baggage that we just continue to carry with us. So it was this question of, how do I interpret my dad's death? How do I interpret the new circumstances that I'm in the situation that I'm in? I was in Japan, I had a dad, now I'm in Canada, and I don't have a dad. And it took a long time for me to interpret all those things, all those changes, my new surroundings, my new friends, schools, all that kind of stuff took time. But I think as I've continued to observe people here, and I've lived in this culture for quite a while now, because I was born in Canada and then I returned to Canada, so it kind of is my home in a sense. I love Japan too. Is those differences at first caused a lot of friction for me.
You know what? I understand what you're saying, because even as kids growing up, you know, I was born in Montreal, and growing up as a kid there, you know, even being different, you know, than the kids
Right.
that were there, right? I mean, no secret, I'm of the East Indian descent, and you know, I look different. I wear different clothes. I may have a different accent, and you know, and not everybody understands that, right? So when you're from a different culture and you come back to Canada, or you know, you're from a different culture and you join the culture that's already where you live. You know, I'm born in Canada myself, and you know, people see you different. It's such a weird feeling, right? But you know, it is taking the steps and sitting down and trying to understand it's nothing you did wrong.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's huge, understanding you didn't do anything, but you still have to grow from it,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah, no, it's still up to me to make up that decision. You know, it's when you have been in personal development for as long as I have, which I feel like was 2007 was kind of my beginning, even though I might have had some introductions here and there along the way. There's so many, you think of so many resources that have helped you, like, and I think of some of the things I learned like 5 years ago, which was take responsibility for your life.
absolutely. And you know, when you first start getting into personal development, that is one of the things you're not getting into it for. You're not getting into personal development to take responsibility for your life.
At first you aren't.
No, you're really just getting in. You're like, hey, someone recommends you picking up a book, or you know, checking out some audio program that they recommend that they had heard, or you know, or reading just a simple newspaper article that they found inspiring, or reading a book that they found inspiring. They hand it to you, and you start reading these, and then those little sentences in these books written by these wonderful authors they start speaking to you and they start impacting you in a way that you weren't expecting it to, right? And for me, I'd start reading and I'd close the book. I said, whoa, that's a little deep. I don't want to start getting into that. That's not what this is just a simple book. Why is it impacting me in different ways? And, when you allowed yourself to be impacted and just be open, that personal development portion of the story that you're reading the book can make a huge difference.
Right. I think at this point we need to ask one final question, but a really important one, which is why or who is personal development for? I think really the fundamental answer is everybody. But
yep.
We need to have a good explanation of why that is. Do you want to give that a try?
Yeah, for sure. I think it is for everybody. And the reason I believe that is, if you want to be an important part of society, or if you have any desire, and some people say, I don't want to be an important part of society. That's okay. But you can still impact your family. You can still impact your friends. You can still impact your dog if you have one, just through personal development, learning how to treat somebody better. That's just one small part of a personal development. Now, and that's for people that don't want to, potentially, right? But for people who want to grow and succeed, and, I look around the room we're sitting in right now, and there's tons and tons of books in here. And,
yeah.
I see you, David, as someone who wants to grow, and, myself as well. I got maybe a little bit less books than you do, but I have definitely do have books at home and pictures on my walls and everything, of things that I want. And, it's for everybody, I think, personal development. And again, the why. When you have a goal, David, personal development is huge, because when you want to strive to get something, you will find ways to work within yourself to have that goal come true. So, do I believe everybody has a goal? I really do. Are they big goals? Not for everybody. But for yourself, that goal you have is your big goal. So find that, whatever it is that motivates you, and, get working.
Right. So we could also say that personal development is for anyone that has a goal, which I think we can safely assume is everybody. It's just we're not always aware of what those goals are. They can sometimes be a little bit more subversive than we realize. But when we have that mirror, like I was talking about earlier, when you have that mirror pointing back at you, you begin to go, oh, that's right. I do have fitness goals. I do have financial goals. I do have health goals. I do have relationship goals. And now you're sort of coming back to the person that you are in a way. You're rediscovering what it is, who you're about, and what things motivate you, or what things excite you, or what things that you would love to see happen in your life. So I think that's probably personal development for anybody,
I agree, David. And the other thing, as you're speaking, I'm thinking of here too, is I believe it was Einstein that said, if you continually do the things that you've done, you're going to keep getting the same results.
Yeah.
If you keep doing what you have done, then you don't need personal development. But keep in mind, you probably won't grow past where you are. Personal development doesn't have to be hard. And I think when people think about personal development, they may think it's something really super hard that they need to do, every single day and put 100% effort into it. But you know what? Even 1% effort each day will eventually get you to 100%. It'll get you to do 2%, maybe 3%, 10%, 100% eventually, as you continue through that process.
Well, we know that perfection is impossible, right? So if that's your goal, then, I think the thing about personal development is it is a never-ending journey in a sense, because you will never achieve perfection, but you can achieve a better place than where you're at. And it's not necessarily about constant discontent or dissatisfaction with who you are. You can be content and growing at the same time. You can learn to appreciate your surroundings and who you are and where you are right now on the way to where you're going. And I feel like that's actually a faster way to get to where you want to go.
Yeah. You said that well, and made me think of a question I wanted to ask you is, who are maybe some of your top 3 personal development leaders that you listen to?
Well,
or read?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and there have been a lot through the years, and it's changed a lot. Early on, obviously, Steve Pavlina was a pretty major influence. I did kind of make this personal development full circle and come back to Steve Pavlina at one point recently. So that was kind of fun. I'm not sure if I can immediately think of others. I guess Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar have been pretty major influences along the way too.
Right.
How about you?
Myself, when I first started to listen to podcasts, I really listened to this one podcast called Motivation to Move with Scott Smith. It really gave me the feeling, I could really also impact other people. And it's taken me a lot through my journey through personal development to get to this place where we're recording our episode here.
It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the journey, and it's part of learning, and it's part of finding the leaders that you want to follow and listen to be motivated. Right now, I still listen to those podcasts every so often, but I've also moved on to other ones. As I was just in a sales career prior to this, I was listening to a lot of Donald Kelly, on the Sales Evangelist, because that made huge differences for me. I wanted to learn, get those quick nuggets so I can apply them at my work right away. Now being in a little bit different place right now, just taking that little time off work and not going back to work for a little bit, putting the steps in place to, start my own businesses, have this podcast with you. I've been reading a lot more, right? So reading and not just listening, right? So one of the things I like to read is to keep myself grounded, right? And the way I do that is a little bit different from everybody. Some people listen to music. I like reading about spiritual stuff. That kind of helps me keeps me grounded, and it helps me understand where I fit into the big picture.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like for me nowadays, business books have kind of become the more important facet of what I'm doing, because I think you can sort of go over the goal setting and productivity things over and over and over again to the point where you kind of have internalized it in a way, or at least you've figured out systems for yourself that work. That's why I've probably leaning more towards business stuff, because I have a lot to learn in that sense. So some of the more recent ones have been like Tim Ferriss, known for the 4-Hour Workweek, of course. Really great inspirational book. I think you would have to adapt it to today's day and age to make it work for you if you really wanted to do the 4-Hour Workweek thing. But there's still so many great points in there. And then Joe Pulizzi, interestingly enough, he's from the Content Marketing Institute, and he wrote a book called Content Inc., which is really good. You wouldn't necessarily associate that with the personal development thing, but that's the first thing he talks about. The first thing he talks about in his book is, I have my goals, I look at them every day, here's how we have things set up in my family, this is how we work together and support each other in our goals. And I thought, that's great. That's really amazing. So personal development, I guess, inspiration and motivation comes from different sources too.
Absolutely. And you made me think of something while you're saying that again too, David. You had a great point. And even in a fictional story, there's always personal development within the characters themselves.
Especially Paulo Coelho type books.
Absolutely. And that's my favorite author, and you nailed it on the head, right? But, there's something with the way he writes, right? He has a way to tell a story, connect you to each character, and really he takes you through this personal development journey. Every one of his books are actually a personal development book, in my opinion. Although they hit on different topics, all the way from finding your path to finding past lives and everything in between. But he gives it he writes it in such a way that you really connect, right? And any author, obviously the two books you named as well, they may not be on the personal development list, and I put that in quotations, but they will give you ways to develop yourself if you choose to take the information out of that book and apply it back to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Well, do you have any thoughts before we wrap up our first show?
Oh man, David, it's been an excellent show. It's for me. I'm a little nervous. Obviously, it's our first show. I think I've done a great job. You've done an excellent job yourself.
Oh, thank you.
My final thoughts on personal development is, if you stop moving, you stop growing, and things that stop growing typically die. So, for our listeners out there, continually find ways to grow, through personal development, and that sometimes just means being your best or being better than your best. best, but don't compare yourself to other people.
Right.
You know, that's what I want to probably leave it with right now.
Yeah, that's great. What was the quote? Don't compare your bloopers to somebody else's highlight reel.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, definitely don't do that. Well, it's
Bob Saget, I think.
is it really?
I don't know.
If it is, awesome. Great. Well, it's been really good connecting with you, listeners. I am David Andrew Wiebe, and joining me was
Maveen, Kaura.
and we can be found at usingyourpower.com. We are using your power. How's that sound?
We're using your power to help you dig deeper and improve your life.
Awesome. Love it. So we'll connect with you again next time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.